It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. Welcome to the show this week. We have tweets about Star Wars. Actually, it's just one tweet. I just really enjoyed it and wanted to share it with you, so I'll do that. We'll talk about the Visions trailer, the next Disney Plus streaming show that we are all anticipating. Is Finn getting a live-action series? Some details about the Obi-Wan Kenobi shooting. Is The Bad Batch actually a prequel to The Rise of Skywalker? Genndy Tartakovsky also talks about his Star Wars Clone Wars micro-series and why he believes it resonates with the fans. Plus, we have some listener feedback this week. And this week's show is brought to you once again by Enzo Rings. We'll have more details about what Enzo Rings is offering for you, the Star Wars fan. But if you want some details ahead of time, head on over to ensorings.com and check out their Star Wars collection. I'm actually wearing an Enzo ring right now.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
Welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you're with another show this week as I record on a nice and cool Saturday morning here in Minnesota. Looking forward to sharing with you a lot of the news coming out this week. A couple of items that kind of popped up late and haven't really been making the rounds. Not even showing up on the Reddit's leak page. But I found it, and I'm going to share it with you. First off, let's start here. I saw this tweet on Friday, and I just thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share it with you because it's a nice little piece of positivity that I think is really relevant, especially with the content that we cover on the show so often. The tweet came from an individual just going by Shaylee on Twitter, and Shaylee wrote, "My dad has been a lifelong Star Wars fan, and Luke Skywalker is his favorite character. He finally watched the sequels, and after he said, The Rise of Skywalker is the best of the 9. I thought it was awesome when he said, I thought it was awesome when she said, meaning Rey Skywalker. It was so nice to see a pure reaction." As I've mentioned, it's kind of a mantra, I guess is the word, on the show of, art is subjective, right? And it certainly rings true when it comes to Star Wars. I just thought that was a really cool tweet and was very succinct in what the person was trying to convey. It was so nice to just see a pure reaction. When George Lucas made Star Wars, and he's said this all along, he made it for kids. And, as kids, it is kind of, not for all kids, okay, I'm generalizing here, but as kids, it's kind of a matter of, were you entertained or were you not entertained? Is it plausible, enough? I've been watching the Transformer movies with Kyle, my 14-year-old. He'll be 15 in December. And we've been watching the Transformer movies, and I've got my favorites in the series. Okay, I really like the first one. I think the first one is fantastic. And then probably next to that is Dark of the Moon. I think Dark of the Moon is really good. And then you get some weirdness in the other ones. There are huge swaths of the second one, Revenge of the Fallen, that I don't enjoy. And then it just starts to kind of get weirder and weirder until you get to The Last Night. And The Last Night is just like Michael Bay having a free-for-all. Just, it doesn't really make much narrative sense. It's kind of hard to follow what exactly is going on and what the stakes are. It's just a spectacle. It's like watching fireworks go off for 2.5 hours. I mention all this because my son, Kyle, is just entertained. He enjoys the last two in the series, which are arguably the least favorite, the Age of Extinction and The Last Night the most, but it really just comes down to him being entertained. Friend of the show, Brennan Marr, and host of Page Turners They Were Not, really hit the nail on the head like about a year ago when he made a comment saying, when he goes and judges Star Wars, it just comes down to a matter of how does it make him feel? And it's not like that for everybody, I get it. But for me personally, that's where Star Wars thrives. It is in that, how is it making you feel area, right? That's the sweet spot for me. And again, George designed these for kids, and so there's a level of, is this plausible enough, right? And for most kids, they easily accept that. So I just wanted to share that with you. I just thought it was a nice tweet, nice observation of an individual going in, watching it, being entertained, and loving it. And I think that's what the majority of the fandom does, apart from those that are hardcore, like you listening to this show or me recording this show. The casual fans, they just go in and want to be entertained and don't really get into the minutia of it. And that's why I think the sequel trilogy will be looked at in a much better light when we get farther down the road. Because I like that type of storytelling. I like my hard science fiction, where it's specifically supposed to be based off of reality, and that adds the layers of tension to it. But like when I write my stories, it really is is it plausible enough? Can you understand this fantasy tech enough to believe that sometime in the year, 2245, that we can do this? Cool, because, we're going to travel way beyond the capability of humanity with this fantasy tech I created. If it's plausible enough and it's entertaining, I'm good. We'll have some more details, by the way. I've got book 6 coming out this week, and I'll save all that towards the end of the show. Speaking of feelings, Star Wars Visions. Okay, this is the next series we're going to be getting on Disney Plus. This is anime that we'll see Star Wars for the first time in this anime form, written by a bunch of different anime directors in a series of different shorter pieces of content. I was not really looking forward to this. I'm not a huge anime fan. I'm not even really an anime fan. The most anime that I have, as I mentioned before on the show, was the Animatrix, because I like the Matrix quite a bit. The Animatrix shorts that they put out, all available on Blu-ray in some of the box sets, where you had some prequels, you had some other anime directors and artists taking putting their perspective and their view, their spin on the Matrix universe, and I enjoy some of those, but it's just not something that I seek out or really go looking for. That being said, I watched the trailer originally in the original foreign language and was like, okay, the visuals are interesting. Well, when they released the English language version, okay, of these cartoons with the English voiceovers and the characters and all that, and it has a slate of fantastic voice characters, by the way, that'll be doing the English version, the English dialogue for these cartoons. Really enjoyed the trailer. I've watched it a couple times now, and while not everything that I saw I find interesting or compelling, there were several clips from a few of what we will see coming up, I believe, in September, that actually does have me interested in watching this. Beyond it being Star Wars. I think just because it was Star Wars, I was probably going to watch it anyways. But This trailer actually got me a little bit hyped for it. It's not canon. We're not getting stories that are going to propel the existing storylines forward as far as we know. I think there's a golden opportunity here for Disney and Lucasfilm to see of these anime stories which ones the fans sort of lean into and are more popular. It'll be interesting. I would imagine it'd be very interesting to sort of break down the popularity of these and then decide moving forward what type of content along these lines that Disney and Lucasfilm might be interested in creating. But I went from like a 1 to 2 interest, with 10 being most interested. I was probably more like on a 3. I was going to watch it, but if I didn't see it, I wouldn't be bothered. Now I'm more at a 6 or 7 after watching the trailer for this. So this looks like it could be very, very interesting. And I'm getting into this idea of other people's interpretation and other cultures' interpretation of Star Wars. And so I'm excited for this now. I think it'll be a nice holdover as we wait for the book of Boba Fett to arrive in December. Oh, by the way, there's a new controversy going on with Boba Fett that I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the show because I think it's stupid. People are still going crazy over the naming of Boba Fett's ship from Slave 1 to Starship. And while I think it's completely unnecessary to distance Boba Fett's ship's name from Slave 1, just like I thought it was ridiculous that they were putting distance on the Slave Leia outfit from Return of the Jedi right on the action figures. I don't care all that much. There's a new controversy now where somebody's saying it's now being called Fire Spray instead of Slave 1, and people are freaking out. My understanding, but I guess I am talking about it now, aren't I? My understanding is that Fire Spray was actually one of the codename descriptions for the actual ship itself beyond its name. Right? So kind of like, if Luke had named his X-Wing, Wicket, okay? Wicket would be the name, but it's an X-Wing fighter. The Slave 1 vehicle was the title of the name, but it had an official title, and in that title was Fire Spray. I'm pretty sure that's actually on the... I don't think I have one. No, I don't. I have it out of the box. The Attack of the Clones Slave 1 version. I'm pretty sure it actually gave the title on there. So anyway, somebody put out a clickbait article, and it was trending number 1 on Twitter, and I was like, why is this trending again? And then I realized, because somebody decided to make an article and stir up the controversy. So, yeah, I really don't care that much. All right, moving on. Quick note about the Obi-Wan Kenobi live action series, because we're going to be talking quite a bit about live action. Apparently, it has wrapped filming. Several of the actors and actresses have been posting their had a great time. It's like an independent film, making what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of loose context comments that don't really provide anything to chew on in terms of what we can expect from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, except for the fact that apparently they have wrapped up filming, and so now they will be heading into, I would imagine, post-production on it. So I'm curious, just like everybody else, looking forward to it. Been following some of what the story could be about. We've talked about it on previous shows. They are obviously, Disney and Lucasfilm, putting a lot behind this. This is probably one of the most, if not the most anticipated piece of content coming out in the near future, beyond like Rogue Squadron. But I would even say at this point in time, just because it's right around the corner, and the source material that Obi-Wan Kenobi is more anticipated than Rogue Squadron is, just based off of the fact that we know little about Rogue Squadron. So, wrapped filming, I would imagine that around the promotion of the Book of Boba Fett, by the end of the year, we'll be getting some content, maybe even some images or a teaser. We do have that Disney Days coming up in November that we talked about on a recent show, where they will be most likely showcasing new shows coming to the Disney Plus streaming platform, which could include Star Wars. And so I would imagine that we'll get something in terms of content, not just for the Obi-Wan Kenobi live-action series, but also for the Andor series as well. Maybe even something with Ahsoka. And perhaps further clarity on what we are actually going to be getting on Disney Plus, since it has been a while since that Investors Day when they made the massive announcement of all the different shows, and there's been a lot of rumors swirling around about what of those shows is, or which of those shows is still going to be created. There's been very little discussion around Lando, a lot of question marks around Rangers of the New Republic, and on top of all that, we've got a brand new leak about a new potential live-action Disney Plus show, and this is one of the main topics for My Nerd World this week.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
Star Wars News Net broke this particular story this week that's been not very widely circulated. I actually kind of found it on a whim. Usually this stuff pops up on the Reddit's leak page, and it didn't this time. But I thought it was interesting, and wanted to share it with you on the show this week. So, John Boyega has been in the social media eye for many reasons this year, writes the article. One of them is the fact that apparently he sat down with Lucasfilm and came out seeing the world with new eyes. The actor has walked back some of his strong words about Disney after The Rise of Skywalker came out in May of last year. It came out in May of last year and said that he'd be open for a return. I'm assuming they mean Rise of Skywalker came out in May of last year for streaming and all that. Obviously, that came out in December of 2019. And that he'd be open for a return as long as Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams were involved. Now there's a new rumor that has surfaced online from the hashtag show, which, take it or leave it, they've been hit or miss in the past, saying the actor could be starring in his own Disney Plus show. I like Finn as the character. I do not believe that he was set aside in terms of storytelling. I like what Rian Johnson did with his character in The Last Jedi. He had his own side plot. I know it's probably one of the least liked things about that film, next to Luke Skywalker, for those that are critical of The Last Jedi. But I enjoy that story. The adventure that he goes on with Rose and going to Canto Bight. I mean, it's a big portion of that film, and there's a lot involved in it. He gets the great battle with Phasma in that film as well. And I never bought into this he got sidelined mentality, right? I think a lot of that came down to, in my opinion, of the harsher critics, just came down to they didn't like the movie, looking for things to complain about, and Finn was one of them. Let's talk about Finn being sidelined. It wasn't the case in the Rise of Skywalker either. A lot of the controversy around John Boyega and Finn stems from the behind-the-scenes chatter that he was supposed to be the main star, like a dual protagonist with Daisy Ridley and the Rey character. And to a certain extent he is, but for individuals that are critical of the sequels, they seem to have latched on to his character wasn't bigger, and John Boyega has even alluded to that. So I'm going to shove all that aside, okay? That is all behind-the-scenes talk that influences individuals' opinions based off of what happened on screen. I want to focus, going back to what I said at the start of the show, with that tweet of that individual who said their father watched the sequels for the first time and thought The Rise of Skywalker was the best one. If you're just watching the films, it is what it is, and Finn is one of the main characters with Rey and Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, Finn, and Poe. There's just no denying that. So shoving all that aside, right, I like the character of Finn. And I think, in my opinion, John Boyega has been overly vocal and critical of it, and just seemed like he, had a chip on his shoulder. All right, so back to the story of what could potentially be happening here. For now, we're taking this with a huge grain of salt, says Star Wars Newsnet. According to the story, J.D. Dillard and Matt Owens' movie. Now, we've known about J.D. Dillard. He directed Slight. He's been slated to write and direct a Star Wars film. It's been on the list of potential films we could see in the future. But we haven't heard much about what they could be doing in a long time in the wake of the Taika Waititi now working on his film, Rogue Squadron coming out in 2023, and then also the Kevin Feige produced and Waldron written film as well. But according to this story, J.D. Dillard and Matt Owens' movie could be refocused as a Disney Plus show starring Boyega as Finn. It would tell the story of a pre-First Order Finn and then jump forward in time to continue in a post-Rise of Skywalker era. That's what probably has me the most excited about the possibility of this. As I've mentioned a lot on the show, I want to progress in the timeline and go beyond the Rise of Skywalker. Dillard and Owens' movie was reported to be in development in early 2020, but we haven't heard anything much since, as I mentioned a moment ago. Their names were not mentioned by Kathleen Kennedy in Lucasfilm's presentation during the Disney Investor Day in December of 2020. Them refocusing the project could make sense, but at the same time, it is even more likely it got scrapped altogether. It's not like Lucasfilm doesn't have a history of signing on with filmmakers and then scrapping their projects. It is up to every reader to decide whether or not they believe the rumor. Meanwhile, we'll make sure to report on everything official that comes out on this, or any other Star Wars project. You may also want to check out one of the episodes of the Resistance broadcast where they talked about whether a future Star Wars project with John Boyega playing a Jedi Finn could happen. So, look, I'm excited about this potential idea. I just really like the idea of bringing in these sequel trilogy characters and making new stories beyond the sequels. Which brings me to something that I want to talk about with regard to the Bad Batch. As always, what are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of a Finn story? Where would you like to see it take place in the timeline? I find it interesting that this could potentially be sort of a pre-Finn in the First Order and then jump ahead. I don't know where that puts Finn, right, in terms of the storytelling. You could certainly play with Finn being Force sensitive, since that was definitely focused upon in the Rise of Skywalker, making him a full-fledged Jedi. I don't know how that would fit into the storytelling moving forward, whether or not that would butt heads with potential episodes 10, 11, 12 sagas that will eventually get sometime in the future. But I like the idea. I like the idea of, like I said, bringing in those sequel trilogy characters and giving Finn his own show and expanding upon it, because I really do, for me personally, I really do like that character and found him really interesting and compelling on screen, and I think there are some fun stories that could be told focusing on him as the main protagonist. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. Along those same lines, real quick before we get to Genndy Tartakovsky talking about his Clone Wars microseries, of which I'm a really big fan of, I want to re-examine just a moment this idea that the Bad Batch is potentially tied directly into Emperor Palpatine cheating death. I've watched several videos and listened to podcasts of the season finale of the Bad Batch, and a lot of mixed feelings about the season finale. Again, expectations are high, especially when you don't have any other major content doing that thing with my fingers. I mean, Visions is a big deal, but again, it's not anything that's perpetuating existing storytelling and moving threads that we've been watching in certain directions. They are standalone stories that are not canon. So I think the expectations were really high with the Bad Batch, and I personally believe we got the announcement of a season 2 a week prior to the season finale of the Bad Batch to let fans know, hey, this story isn't over yet, and we're not ending this with a big ta-da, because there wasn't a big ta-da moment at the end of the Bad Batch. We had the story of them getting off of, spoiler alert, right, getting off of Kamino, and I expected there to be more bigger revelations than there were, but apparently those are storylines and threads that they will tell and pull on in Season 2. That being said, a lot of people are focusing on Nala Se being taken in by the Empire. I do find the sort of B-plot, C-plot story of the transition from the Republic to the Empire, and especially the shoving out of the clones and moving in of the TK units of stormtroopers. I think that's all very interesting. But Nala Se being taken in by the Empire, seeing the scientists there wearing the same clothing as Dr. Pershing from The Mandalorian, has given people this idea that Omega and Nala Se and what they were doing with Omega on Kamino before they destroyed it are directly tied into the Emperor cheating death. If that is the case, there was a Q&A with the writers and showrunners for The Bad Batch, and somebody had presented them this theory, that is Nala Se directly tied into the Emperor wanting to cheat death and cloning. Is this tied into what we saw in The Mandalorian with Grogu and the attempts to pull his blood out because of his M count? And the individuals in charge of the show were very quick to dismiss it and talk about, well, we can't talk about that right now. If it is all directly tied, and the whole purpose of all of this, and Nala Se and what we got in The Bad Batch is really just a backstory on Emperor Palpatine's contingency plan that we've been talking about over the course of the past few episodes, I almost wish that they weren't keeping it a mystery. I'm in love with the idea that they are expanding upon what JJ did in The Rise of Skywalker with this new content, if it ends up being true. I think that's awesome. Certainly pushes back on the idea, which I think has been completely blown out of the water at this point in time, of Disney and Lucasfilm rejecting the sequel trilogy and trying to retcon it. We're getting more toys of The Rise of Skywalker, and it appears that a lot of the storytelling that we're getting could be directly tied into The Rise of Skywalker and filling in that backstory of what Palpatine had been doing this whole time and what programs he was putting in place in order to extend his life. Like I said, I hope that if that is the case, that they get right to it and really focus on that, because to me, that could really elevate the sequel trilogy and perhaps provide some interesting and relevant backstory context to why Palpatine ended up in The Rise of Skywalker. So why does that matter? It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, apart from the fact that I think it would be cool if people that were lukewarm or cold on The Rise of Skywalker perhaps found a way to enjoy that film through further storytelling and context on the things that happened in that film. I just want to see people enjoy Star Wars, and I love The Rise of Skywalker, and I think it would be great if Disney and Lucasfilm were doing what they could to expand upon that storytelling and maybe set the stage for what comes after The Rise of Skywalker. So we'll have to wait to see when we get Bad Batch Season 2, whether or not this actually ends up being the case. But it already is raising my enjoyment of the Bad Batch even higher than what it was when I watched it, thinking, all right, not only are we watching this story about these really interesting characters in a post-Order 66 galaxy, not only are we watching the transfer of power and the Empire formed in some of these smaller singular stories and experiences with these characters, not only are we being introduced to new and interesting characters, and not only are we messing around with cloning, right, and the Empire wanting to do more experiences, but maybe we're actually watching the backstories and a prequel to not only The Mandalorian, but what we ended up getting in the sequel trilogy. And I'll leave you with one more thought. The Bad Batch, in my opinion, already elevates The Force Awakens and the line that Kylo Ren had at the beginning of that film of, perhaps Perhaps Snoke should consider using a clone army, right? Perhaps we should consider using a clone army. Now that we have all this further backstory, and we know that Kamino's been destroyed, which probably wasn't written at that point in time, so it's kind of like, okay, we're getting context now that they didn't know when they wrote The Force Awakens, but now we have further storytelling to sort of show that, oh, if Kylo Ren is talking about cloning, he's not talking about Kamino, he's talking about what the Empire has at its disposal, right? I just think that's rad, and it elevates my viewing, my personal viewing experience of it. All right, again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. Before we move on to our next item, I want to talk to you about something.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Look, I have found something that I think every fan needs to have, and something that I have been enjoying thoroughly as I've been wearing one of these every single day. It is from Enso Rings, ENSO Rings, an industry leader in silicone rings. They've teamed up with Star Wars to make these amazing rings that are instant collector's items. You have got to go and check these out at ENSORings.com. And I want to tell you up front that you can get free shipping with the promo code Star Wars. They have a Star Wars collection from Enso Rings, and it is so cool. Right, Star Wars fans will immediately be able to tell each character's ring from the distinct designs and colors. It is so cool to see the faces and the helmets on these rings. You have the Mandalorian, Darth Vader, Grogu, R2-D2, C-3PO, and a Stormtrooper. Now, I have a small version of Grogu that sits on my desk. Right, my little character doll. I actually have my Enso Rings on his ears. Now, it comes in a really cool collector's box, which I love, but I've taken the collector's box and I've put it up with my collection of Star Wars toys because I want to be able to access my rings whenever I can. But I color coordinate these things. The majority of my t-shirts in my closet are Star Wars shirts. So you've got your dark gray Mandalorian, you've got your silver Stormtrooper, you've got your black Darth Vader, you have your signature cobalt blue R2-D2, you've got your gold C-3PO, and you've got your signature green Grogu. And I wear these rings every single day. So listen, for yourself, the Star Wars fan, or the Star Wars fan in your life, do not wait and go and order your Enso ring today. Again, at ENSORings.com, ENSORings.com. Free shipping with the promo code Star Wars. These are rad. I dig them. I love wearing them. It's a unique way to go and express your fandom. And I definitely want to encourage you to go check them out at ENSORings.com.
This is not going to go the way you think.
But this will. Tartakovsky explains why his Clone Wars series resonates with fans. This is an interview that Genndy Tartakovsky did with CBR, and explains why he thinks the Clone Wars series still resonates with Star Wars fans. He says, I like to think that it has had a lasting impact, and I think we were one of the first things that George Lucas let out for somebody else to do. Besides some of the books and the comics and stuff, there really wasn't anything in film media that was done, Tartakovsky said in an exclusive interview with CBR. So we did a good job, he continued. That was, 10 years ago? More? 20 years ago almost? I think it was 2003 or 4, so we're coming up on 20 years since we did it, and that people still talk about it, and it still resonates, and they just made a new toy line about it. That's incredible. It's not just us, obviously. It's the characters of the universe that everybody still loves, but what we did still resonates and still holds up, which is incredible. Tartakovsky said that he went on to say that he was extremely proud of his Clone Wars cartoon. He says, I think maybe in some weird way, to take a lot of credit for everything, maybe it did loosen things up the way that George thought about stuff. And that may be other people's approach to this amazing ideas and property would be okay, he concluded. Now, not to be confused with the CG animated Dave Filoni helmed Star Wars The Clone Wars, which premiered on the Cartoon Network in 2008, Tartakovsky's Star Wars Clone Wars initially hit the network in late 2003, about a year and a half after the theatrical premiere of Star Wars Episode II, Attack of the Clones. Tartakovsky Clone Wars was the first on-screen adaptation of the conflict from Star Wars Episode II, Attack of the Clones, which was first alluded to in the original Star Wars film in 1977. The Emmy-winning microseries ran for a total of 25 episodes across 3 seasons, which were released in the form of 2 volumes. Clone Wars initially concluded its run on the Cartoon Network in March 25th of 2005, roughly 2 months before the premiere of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Tartakovsky's cartoon even marked the first on-screen appearance of some of Episode 3's characters, namely General Grievous and Commander Cody. Tartakovsky's Clone Wars was added to the Disney Plus streaming service earlier this year. I'm a huge fan. You've heard me talk about it on the show. I'm a huge fan of Tartakovsky's Clone Wars series. The style is different and not usually my cup of tea, but the storytelling in it is so great. And those initial episodes, the way they were done in 2 and 3 minute episodes put together in this series, gives it just this epic, fast-paced type of storytelling. Genndy really zeroed in on a lot of different Star Wars aesthetics that made it feel wholly Star Wars while being something new. It really did, in my opinion, what The Mandalorian did first. Genndy took Star Wars and the feeling of Star Wars, and even what was happening within the prequels, and he brought it to the original trilogy in terms of the way that it felt. And that's something The Mandalorian did. The Mandalorian feels and looks very original trilogy Star Wars. And Genndy very uniquely did that same thing with the aesthetic, but also attached it to the prequels. And as I mention often, it elevates the prequels to another level. If you have not watched these before, or it's been a long time since you've watched them, just throw on that first season and sit down, and you could watch for like 5 or 6 minutes and get through like 3 episodes. It's really, really cool. And I was as surprised as anybody that they ended up releasing more Clone Wars cartoon toys from Genndy Tartakovsky recently. Like he said, there's a whole line that came out, and it was Zach over at Knights of Vader who had said that perhaps that was a telltale sign that it was doing very well on the Disney Plus streaming platform, and that's why they decided to sort of re-release and repackage, because that's what it was. I actually have some original Genndy Tartakovsky toys, because there was a line that was released before, but perhaps it did so well on the streaming plus service that they decided to re-release those toys because of how popular it had been. So definitely go and check it out. I love that series, and it's nice to see it continue to get some attention. On next week's show, by the way, just as a bit of a preview, we'll talk a little Death Star. Star Wars Inside Intel on StarWars.com, that Inside Intel series that they had, and that's the same writer that did the Palpatine contingency write-up a couple of weeks back. She's got some really interesting articles on there, and they kind of fly under the radar. And there's a lengthy piece that came out this week just talking about the history of the Death Star that we will share on next week's show. Before we get to listener feedback this week, got just a couple of listener feedbacks to share with you. Again, I want to remind you to head on over to EnzoRings.com and check out their Star Wars collection of rings. Really, really awesome silicone rings. And I failed to mention it before, but the Enzo rings are made with high-quality 100% silicone, and they are manufactured right here in the U.S. in Utah. And they're perfect for wearing as a high-quality wedding ring replacement, a fashion accessory, or just like I do, to show off your love of Star Wars. So go to EnzoRings.com and check those out.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, just got a couple of listener feedbacks this week. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com or up on YouTube. J.O.B. writes this. I would like to see Caitlin Nacone from The Walking Dead play Jana Solo. She looks like she could be Adam Driver's sister. Look it up. You can't unsee it. No, I did, and you are absolutely right. And this was answering the question of last week of what characters you'd like to see sort of pop up in Star Wars content in the future. And Jaina Solo, that would be really interesting. And I totally agree with your assessment. Once you said that, I cannot unsee that anymore either. So thank you, J.O.B. Brian Martin asks this question. Do you think they should have teased Palpatine's return at the end of The Last Jedi? Well, given the fact that it doesn't seem like anybody was completely sold on on whether or not Palpatine was going to return, or just whether or not he was going to return, probably impossible to have put that at the end of The Last Jedi, just because they didn't see it coming. That being said, I don't necessarily need it. I was, again, perfectly fine with the return of Palpatine and the explanation that they gave in The Rise of Skywalker. And as I mentioned, earlier in the show, the fact that the Bad Batch may be telling sort of the backstory on the Emperor's cloning program makes me appreciate his return even more. I just love that movie. As always, Brian, thank you for the email. All right, Javier writes this. I've just watched the last episode of The Bad Batch, and I have to say I'm kind of disappointed. Expected much more for the season finale. The first episode was awesome, but the rest of the season had high and lows overall. Not too good. Now I'm really, really waiting for Kenobi. I hope this is a redemption for Hayden in the future and can have a movie of his own, Darth Vader spinoff. I hate how people criticize his performance in the prequels. Stay well. Yeah, again, Hayden Christensen's criticism of in the prequels really isn't all that fair, in my view. That was the directing of George Lucas. George wanted, intentionally, he wanted a very 30s and 40s style dialogue. That's what he was going for. And it just didn't work out the way that George had wanted, I think. When George designed the original trilogy, he was basing it off of his love of those Saturday morning serials that he would go and see. Ones that you actually had to go to a theater to go and watch for a while. Your Flash Gordon, series. And when George went and made the prequels, it's not talked about a lot, but he has said that he wanted a particular style of dialogue and storytelling. He's mentioned before about how his films can be viewed as silent movies if you wanted to. But the way that the acting was and the way that he directed everybody in the prequels was very much in George's mind, from what I've read and heard him say, a 30s and 40s type of dialogue, which is thinner than what you get today. It's not as meaty. It can be a little bit more whiny. It can seem a little bit wooden. What George did with the original trilogy in riffing off of his love of those Saturday morning adventure serials, that worked. George tried that in a different way with the prequels by presenting dialogue that was more along the lines of 30s and 40s and in 50s, and it didn't quite work as well. The audience didn't like it as much, I think, as George had hoped, but that's what his intention was. So Hayden kind of got a raw deal there. If you watch him in any of the other films that he's done, and I kind of default back to Jumper because I own that movie, and I happen to enjoy that movie quite a bit. He is he's a fine actor, and it will be fascinating to watch him in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, depending on what that character is going to do. Are we going to be getting flashbacks like people are talking about? Is my theory that they're going to show Vader with his helmet off because we know that he doesn't need his helmet on in order to survive. So I'm interested to see what Hayden brings and what Deborah Chow is able to do with him, who is the director of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So won't have to wait too much longer, probably less than a year. All right, wrapping things up, I want to direct you to mynerdworld.net. in honor of the release of EMBARK, Fear the Dangerous Night, Book 6 in my EMBARK Science Fiction Space Opera series. On the blog right now are a bunch of promo codes to grab free audiobooks for books 1 and 2. Consider it your EMBARK audiobook starter kit. All you have to do is go to the blog page at mynerdworld.net, and all the links are available in the latest blog where you can go grab a code and redeem it from Audible for a free copy of EMBARK Book 1 and EMBARK Book 2 while they last. So if you go to the website and a code has already been used, just copy and paste another code and try that one. I think there's like 20 or 30 codes that I put up there. Also, the link to pre-order Fear the Dangerous Night Book 6 is available there at the website as well, but you can also just go to Amazon.com and search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. The pre-order is available now. The ebook will be out on this coming Thursday, the 26th. That's when the ebook gets released. The paperback will also be available on that day, and the paperback actually will be available within the next few days. That way you can order it early and hopefully get it by Thursday or Friday of this week. I'm wrapping up the final chapters of recording the audiobook, which is the last read-through of Book 6, and once that's done, I can go ahead and format the paperback and put it up for sale. So that'll happen this weekend, and as soon as Amazon approves it, the paperback will be available. So I would imagine Monday or Tuesday this week, you should be able to go to Amazon.com and pick up Book 6 in paperback, or at least order it. But if you are an ebook reader, go and pre-order the Book 6 ebook right now, and it'll be waiting for you first thing on Thursday morning. And beyond that, go to mynerdworld.net and the blog page and grab yourself, if you haven't already, a free audiobook 1 or 2 available there. All right, that's it. Have yourself a fantastic week. Thanks for checking out the show. I look forward to hearing from you between now and next weekend. And now here's Obi-Wan Kenobi to officially bid you adieu.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.